So, now, one of the things we need to do, we now demonstrated the way that the legs are put on, but we haven't talked anything about how the apron, this whole series of pieces of wood, is tied down to the top. And before we do that, we have to talk about how wood expands and contracts with moisture. As you can see, the grain of the wood runs this way. So cross grain is this way. Well, cross grain is the way wood expands and contracts with moisture. If the humidity, see, the humidity is 61 indoors now in Portland, Maine in March. Well, if you came back later in the year, when the humidity is higher, it gets up to 80 or 90, this wood is going to expand. And we got to allow that. Even though the desk is going to be inside, nonetheless, the windows are open, the humidity is high on the inside of the house as well. So we need not to glue this apron to the tabletop or desktop, but rather we need to lock it in place and allow it to move. There are several ways to do that. I can think of at least two others, but the way I'm going to describe is the use of what I call buttons. These are little buttons. If you focus in close on one, you can see what they're like. They're a little edge like that. It's got a screw hole drilled all the way through. And what does it do? Well, look where that goes. That slides right in there, and you put a screw there, and that locks that in place. But if you back it off a little bit, then that can move, the wood here can move relative to the apron. Same thing on this side, same thing on this side, same thing over here. These are all the places where I cut buttons. I'm going to place buttons and lock down the apron to the tabletop. The screw goes all the way through, and it goes about that deep. Okay, so how do I make those? Well, let's see. I cut them out of, you want to cut them out of a hardwood. So I cut them out of cherry. And once this dimension here is determined, that determines this dimension, because you want them so that they lock down in place. And then you just cut a piece of wood that wide. This is in the same width of it. I laid out a whole series of these on a piece of wood and then just cut them out. I cut this out with a bandsaw and then use the drill to put that screw in, that screw hole in. So that's how they're made. But now what I want to demonstrate is how do I get these little slots in here? Well, I could have done this a lot easier. I could have done all these slots way before I put this apron together. It would have been a lot easier. I could have just gone to my router table and done it. But guess what? I didn't think about it. I missed that one. So I said, how am I going to do this? Well, here's how I did it. I'm going to move the table away from here because I gotta show you how I pull this together. Put the apron on my flat surface. This is an extremely flat surface. It's a door that has two pieces of steel on both sides so it stays flat. I just lock it in place. And then I've got this. Again, I'm going to throw dust around because I wasn't thinking of this beforehand, but I decided to make a little device with my router. This is my router, and this is a homemade little piece of wood. There's a bit that cuts, I think that's 7/16 of an inch, or maybe a half an inch. Anyway, it's the size of this groove. and then I locked on a stop on this side. All right, so I set the depth to exactly what I want, and then I marked this dimension is the width of a router. This happens to be 5.5. So if I want this to be this wide, I measure the extents of it, and then I add half the distance of the mortise either way, and it gives me just what I want. So I plug it in, position it like this, so it's right above the top, and then when it's I just drop that right down in and move it back and forth just like that. Make my cuts both ways, and that gives me that slot. That's exactly how I do it. Kelly table, a Telly desk build. If you can focus a little bit on this drawer, of course it's upside down because the table is upside down, but this drawer has already been fit, and there are several components to holding it in place. First of all, the opening is just the size of this piece of wood, which is all made from one piece of wood, but then it has kickers and runners that are glued in place here, 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 and here. And then it has a stop back here, and it just slides in place. It's been fit quite closely. Just hits that stop. And that's what we'll do with the drawer over here. So I'm going to demonstrate how I did all of this work. Before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit more about the buttons. And I've added buttons. You saw before that I put those two buttons in. I've added buttons here and here because this piece of wood needs to be locked in place to hold the drawer. And it is doweled in back and in front. And if you just take a look at those dowels, I've already cut those in. Those are 3/8 inch walnut dowels. The client did not want to have tiger maple or anything, that would show, but those are the ends of the dowels. They've been glued in place, drilled and glued in place, and then cut off with a saw. And if you haven't seen that method before, it's really interesting to do with a Japanese saw. A Japanese saw just like this, and let's say that was sticking out that far, you just hold it against the place where you're going to cut, and you just go back and forth, and it doesn't mar the wood, or if it does, it's just a little bit that you can sand off, and you can cut that almost smooth like this and really get a nice finish to it. So that's just a little something that you can do to hold these in place. That same dowel was placed in the back. I cut those both in the back here, two in front, two in front, two in back. I'll do the same thing over here. If we switch over to the top here, the way I cut those holes was a Forstner bit, and the Forstner bit is shown here. When it cuts through hardwoods, what you want to do after a while is sharpen it. And so I acquired this sharpening kit, which is really quite nice because it comes with a small little hand sharpening tool, and then a 300 grit and a 600 grit flat plate. These are diamond stones, so they're very effective, and some fluid and things like that. I really do recommend these. And the way that you sharpen it, if you can focus in on here, you don't want to take any metal off the edge all the way around. So what you do is you put this device right in that groove, and you're going to sharpen the edge right there. Okay, so you just feel it flat, put it down on the surface, and then just rotate back and forth like that. Sometimes it can be very effective to use the 300 side first. Again, you will just feel when you're flat, and then you rotate back and forth, and it's got two such surfaces. And you do the same thing on the other side. You just feel when you're flat, and then pass it back and forth. There's one more step in the process, and that is you want these tips to be sharp here, right at the edge, here and here. And you use the round part of the hand tool, and just sharpen those like that, and sharpen the other one like this. So you haven't changed the diameter of this bit at all. You just made it sharp. And it's important to do that after maybe drilling 4 or 5 holes like this, because that wood dulls the blade. Okay. So the next step is to make on this side what I have on this side. And what I've done, I'll just show you how it all goes together. And well, no, I'm gonna pause a little bit, because what we have to do first before we put it together is drill these, or I'm sorry, use the router to cut that little groove. Why? Because that's where a button goes in. And the button, if you can see that, doesn't fit exactly to the bottom because you want to pull it down. And remember, we're doing that because the wood does not expand with the grain. It expands across the grain, and you want this table to be able to expand and contract with moisture content. So I'll show you how we route those. I put one in the middle, I put 2 on the other side. So I've already marked where they go, and I have the router set up. I've already used a test piece. It's always good to use a test piece, because otherwise you don't want to cut into your wood, and that's just right. And that's a 1/2 inch bit, and it's set a specific distance that this button will fit perfectly. So that's taken care of. And always mark your boards. I've marked all these boards. This is right top, so it goes right on the top. This is the left top. I don't know if you can see that mark. I just use a pencil to mark them. And because I don't want to cut these on the inside, because it's going like this, I have to cut it on the outside. So we'll put hearing protection on, and go ahead. You probably noticed that no dust was flying all over the place with this router, like I had to do for the bevel on this table. We went through that segment, and the reason is I have a dust collection system that is underneath the table. I've talked about this in another video. It sucks it from both the top and the bottom, sucks it into a shop vac, and it's very, very effective at keeping dust out of my shop. So a little bit of sanding like this, and that's all ready to go. So that slides in place. Just like this. You gotta tap it down a little bit. And the back piece goes in place. Now I've set this up. I've got a little mark right over there because I test fit this before. I cut all these pieces to their size, and obviously you can see that it just fits down in here. One more thing, probably can't see it, but this is raised up a little bit. It's loose here at the bottom, so I'm gonna put a clamp on that. Just take one of these big clamps, lock it in place here. So I pull it down because I want that to be tight to the deck, tight to the table top there. Okay, so now these are flush here. Flush meaning flush at this surface right here, obviously, because that's the way you want them. And then the width of this piece, the width of the piece in the back is exactly the opening in the front. So these pieces, this is the bottom piece on the left-hand side, goes in place like that. It's going to be glued in place. This is the bottom piece on the right-hand side that goes in place like this. Okay. Now, next, what we do is, prior to drilling the dowel holes, we clamp it. And why do we clamp it? Well, because we don't want it to move around. You gotta get this back to that mark and push it down tight and then clamp it in place. Just like that, so it doesn't move. Now the other thing we want is to make sure that we're square. So we have a device like this that just verifies that that is square, because you want that square, not back and forth like this. It's flush in the front, so that's good. This piece goes in place. Now we come over to this side. This is at the mark, so that's going to be good. Now we make this flush. And again, get another clamp. Put it right over the edge. I'm going to set this up. I can't set it up like that. I have to move the drawer in and out. So I'll just catch it on the edge like that. I'll have to adjust this when I make my drill holes, because I want to drill right where this clamp is. Now, if I got it all right, when I take the drawer, it's going to slide right in there. Remember, these are upside down. So, here we go. Now, I haven't set up my stop in the back, but I'll do that later. So, what I want you to take a look at is just this beautiful, lovely finish in front, not the finish, but the grain pattern going from left to right. Because as we talked about many times before, this is all cut out of a single piece of wood. And I'm very happy with that. All right, so what's next? Well, we also have the top pieces cut, and they slide in like this, and they get, how do I do this? Well, yeah, that's a good thing to talk about. You saw me how I slid this in, and I'm happy with the fit. But you don't start off there. You don't start off being happy with the fit. What you do is you, way before you put your drawer in, you take a square like this, because that drawer was built square, and you hold it up against the back edge, just like this. And you can see that that's almost perfectly square. So once you got that square, and this is just touching here, you know that the drawer is going to go in well. You know that this side is going to be good because that's the opening to the drawer. So now you cut the back piece so that it just fits exactly right, and it just slides in. You can see I'm sliding that in with very little effort. It hasn't been waxed or anything yet to slide on those rails, but I'm very happy with that fit. So, like I say, measuring these to get them right, that's good. Getting this piece cut to the right length because it's the length in the front of the front opening. Once you've done all that, then your runners on the bottom match exactly the width to the top here. So that's just right, because you know the drawer is going to slide right in on top of them. And I'm not going to do it now, but I will take these back out and glue those bottom runners in to the side. Once that's done on both sides, put the whole thing back in, then put these on top. And then what do I do? Well, now I want them to fit just exactly right. So I take a little piece of cut wood, about this thickness. This is, I don't know, maybe maybe 12 thousandths, something like that. Slip it under the drawer here. Just put this right here and put this right here. Okay, so that'll give me just about the clearance that I want. I do it on both sides. Push it down. And I do the same thing over here with this piece of wood. Let's just do it a minute, because it's a worthwhile exercise. Because this is the way you can get good fit up. Just put that little board, that little piece there, and push it down. Okay, now, how's it slide? Well, that hasn't moved, but that's where that was. This has a little bit of clearance up and down. This is not bad. And that's the way you fit it in place. Now, what you see is where this wood comes to this fixed piece. You remember that. And when you put the glue in, you put it back where it was. The same thing with this side. Then before the glue sets, you take the thing out and you slide it back and forth, and you make whatever final adjustments you have. Once you've done that, you're all set.